My father grew up in the Great Depression, and back then everyone came to the movie theater. They'd watch a small, dim screen in a big, dark room. But my father believed that movies could be so much more. He longed to bring the 3D reality that we experience in the real world into that dark room. But here's the catch. He wanted to do it without glasses. Here is a picture of my father. Robert Collender. This was taken in 2018, the year that he passed away. He invented so many different ways of making 3D without glasses, and this is one of them. He called it the Optiplexer. I know, he was an engineer, but let's be honest, that name is way more creative than Apple Watch. The Optiplexer he made in the 1970s. And this will play a 16 millimeter home movie shot on a single camera, and it will play it back in 3D without glasses. And you can actually walk around the screen and see in and around the objects in the image like a hologram. And he did this only with optics. There is no computer in this device. He was a genius and a good man and a great father. He loved learning and he loved teaching me, and he would always remind me about how important it is to pursue wisdom and to love people. He worked as an engineer, but what he really wanted to do was 3D full-time, and he worked very hard to make that happen. One time there was a billion-dollar foreign firm that said that they wanted to fund him, and so they flew him across the sea, and the CEO brought the division heads to this big boardroom, this long conference table, and he presented his research to them. Partway through the trip, he realized that they had deceived him. They had no intention of funding him. They just wanted to take his research. So how did they persuade him? Well, we've known how persuasion works for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks called the art of persuasion rhetoric. And they said that there are three ways to persuade someone. They called these ethos, logos, and pathos. But let's de-Greek these terms. Ethos is the appearance of a person's character. When we trust a person, we open ourselves to their influence. So let's call this character. Logos is the logic, the facts, the data, the arguments, the evidence that we present, and when we make it clear, let's call that truth. Pathos is the emotional connection we make with an audience when they feel that we have empathy for them. So let's call that empathy. Character, truth, empathy. A speaker who has these is going to be powerfully persuasive, but each can be faked in order to lie and manipulate. I may not know the whole story, but I bet those executives seemed trustworthy. Character. They appealed to my dad's rational mind. We have funds to invest. Truth. I'm sure they flattered him. This is amazing work. You are a great engineer. Empathy. They faked, they used the tools of rhetoric to take from him. Don't you just hate those guys? They're so evil. But let's be honest, don't we all do the same thing? Haven't we all faked character, truth, or empathy at some point to get what we want? Well, to quote that climactic scene at the end of Good Will Hunting between Robin Williams and Matt Damon, it's not your fault. Our society tells us that nice guys finish last, If you're not a winner, you're a loser. You got to do what you got to do. So we persuade from selfish ends, selfish goals, and manipulate. But at what price? The more we persuade like this, the more we destroy our relationships with each other. Does it have to be this way? Yes. Well, this TED Talk sucks. No, it does not have to be this way. And in fact, remember, it's through character, truth, and empathy that rhetoric persuades. What do you call someone who always treats other people with character, truth, and empathy? Someone who loves. You see, we have misunderstood rhetoric and misused it. Rhetoric is persuasion from a heart of love. Manipulation isn't rhetoric. The manipulator uses the tools of rhetoric to get what he wants. In fact, he's using the tools of rhetoric to conceal that he doesn't have character, truth, or empathy. He's using the hands and feet of rhetoric without the heart of rhetoric. He is dismembering rhetoric. And we can now see this on brain imagery. Special thanks to Dr. Daniel Langelbin at the University of Pennsylvania for his remarkable work on the neuroscience of lying and for letting me use these two images. So he says, well, in his research, one of the things that he's observed is that the brain of liars, that brain uses different regions from those used by truth tellers. Now, this is a very complex field, but put very simply, there is a quantitative difference between the brains of liars and truth tellers. What's more, brain imaging shows us that psychopathic people underactivate the empathy regions of their brain. Lying and manipulation compromise the very regions of the brain that make us good at rhetoric. Rhetoric is not manipulation. It's not evil. Rhetoric flows from empathy, and empathy is at the very heart, the very center of love, care for others. What rhetoric really is persuasion from a root of love. Let me make this real for you. My dad was nothing like the men who deceived him. He always had my best interests in mind. Let me show you his best invention. When he was in his 60s, I went to him and I said, "Hey, Dad, would you write me the story of your life?" And he said, "Sure, I'll get on it." And so he wrote me this. In this, he describes his good, his bad, his successes, his setbacks, his sins. He is utterly transparent. He evaluates all of his life's decisions, the lessons that he learned. This is a lifetime of wisdom. He's passed away, but he still guides me. He still persuades me from a root of love. Before I get to that, let me be clear. I've made many mistakes in my life. But I can't tell you how many times the memory of my dad's words or his example saved me from making a bad decision. How many of you had that person in your life that did try to persuade you, but that persuasion always came from a root of love? Maybe you never met your parents. Maybe they were bad ones. Maybe it was an older brother or sister, or a college roommate, or that crazy grandmother. And it's like she's sitting on your shoulder, and she will whisper things to you and say different things. And you just know how she would look at a certain situation, and it was always for your good. Why is it that we let that person into our souls? It's because we all know that there are times in our lives when we need persuasion and from a root of love. That's what we can choose to be. You may think, I'm not being practical, that I'm naive. I've taught rhetoric for over 20 years. Let me tell you from experience, it is so liberating for students when they see, when they experience that they don't have to lie or manipulate to persuade. I wish you could see the look in their eyes, the look on their faces. When they see that it's when you throw away lying and manipulation, that's when the art begins. Authentic character, a vast mind, and deep empathy don't make students fragile or weak. To borrow from Nassim Taleb, they make their rhetoric, right? Character, truth, and empathy make their rhetoric and their person anti-fragile. Students with rhetoric, who've mastered rhetoric, know that in this world, they can be a force for good. We're in a big room, but can we pretend we're in a small one? And I'm just talking to you. This is the choice that I humbly present to you. It's a choice that you'll probably face in the next 24 hours. Do you want to take the tools of rhetoric and manipulate and turn off the loving parts of your brain? Or do you want to rediscover rhetoric and persuade from a heart of love? If you rediscovered rhetoric, what kind of world would you make? And what kind of legacy would you leave if you did? Thank you.